President Trump's first 100 days back in office have been marked by major disruptions in trade, foreign affairs, and government operations, highlighted by his unconventional leadership style. Key moments included a billionaire-filled inauguration, Trump attending the Super Bowl, and Elon Musk leading aggressive federal cuts as head of the Department of Government Efficiency. Trump renamed the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, clashed publicly with Ukraine's President Zelensky, and oversaw the removal of the Black Lives Matter Plaza mural. His administration also dismantled the Department of Education, staged a high-profile immigration crackdown in El Salvador, and launched controversial new tariff rates at a Liberation Day ceremony. Widespread protests erupted nationwide against Trump and Musk's policies, especially in response to DOJ's impact and the administration's hardline economic and immigration moves. Many voters say Trump's second-term policies have already deeply impacted their daily lives in ways no previous administration had, with concerns ranging from tariffs to government program cuts. Some Trump supporters remain optimistic about long-term benefits from his aggressive trade policies, while others have grown disillusioned amid economic instability. People are facing multiple hardships, including job struggles, potential healthcare losses, and threats to diversity programs. Farmers and ranchers report funding freezes and government job cuts causing serious financial strain, while retirees fear higher costs and cuts to Social Security and medication access. Although some view the current economic pain as necessary for future prosperity, a Wall Street Journal poll shows growing public skepticism about Trump's economic plans. The Trump administration is centralizing greater control of federal hiring and firing through the Office of Personnel Management, shifting decision-making power away from individual agencies. Federal workers, especially top-ranking bureaucrats, will now be evaluated primarily on how faithfully they carry out the president's policies instead of traditional competencies like leadership or business acumen. OPM is being given expanded authority to review and fire employees across the executive branch based on new suitability criteria, including misconduct or failure to support administration goals. Although Elon Musk is stepping back from his leadership role in DOGE, OPM appears set to institutionalize much of his government reduction efforts by reshaping workforce rules. Critics and watchdog groups warn that these changes could heavily politicize the federal workforce, undermining the traditional merit-based system meant to keep government operations apolitical and stable. President Trump has recently softened his stances on key issues like firing the Federal Reserve Chair, tariffs on China, and the Ukraine conflict, reflecting a shift from his usual never-surrender persona. White House officials argue that these moves are strategic, not reversals, but critics see them as signs of political weakness amid slipping approval ratings. Trump's pivot on tariffs is seen as particularly significant because it challenges one of his core economic beliefs about reviving U.S. manufacturing. Chinese media has mocked Trump's backtracking, and economic concerns are growing among voters, threatening his perceived strength in handling the economy. While Trump's unpredictability has often been part of his political strategy, growing public dissatisfaction and chaotic governance may be eroding his support ahead of future elections. The Trump administration has created a new framework to conduct staggered trade negotiations with about 18 major trading partners, focusing on tariffs, non-tariff barriers, digital trade, rules of origin, and economic security. The U.S. Trade Representative's Office has outlined a flexible but rigorous plan aiming to complete initial talks by July 8, after which reciprocal tariffs could be imposed on nations that don't reach agreements. Some countries like India are further along in negotiations, while major partners like Mexico, Canada, and China are on separate tracks, with China facing potential 145% tariffs. The administration claims it has already received trade proposals from 18 countries, but some, like the European Union, say they are still waiting for specific U.S. demands. Meanwhile, nations like the EU and the UK are setting their own boundaries for negotiations, refusing changes to taxes, agriculture subsidies, and certain product standards. President Trump's cabinet uses social media heavily to portray constant success and connect intimately with supporters despite facing real-world political obstacles. Cabinet members, many of whom are media-savvy former commentators, post action-packed and personal content online, creating a dynamic, cinematic image of the administration. Federal agencies like the FBI and State Department have dramatically increased their online activity, sometimes posting aggressive and controversial updates. While this strategy energizes Trump's base and garners huge online engagement, it risks isolating broader audiences as Trump's approval ratings fall. The administration's media approach operates without centralized instructions, and many officials maintain personal social media accounts mixing official duties with casual, relatable content. President Trump has signaled a willingness to reduce tariffs on Chinese goods, raising hopes for ease U.S.-China trade tensions, but China interprets this as a sign he may back down under pressure. Chinese officials insist that no trade negotiations have begun and demand a complete repeal of all tariffs before talks can proceed, citing distrust in Trump's consistency. Despite the economic benefits a truce could bring, analysts doubt the comprehensive deal is likely, with tensions potentially spilling into investment and finance sectors. President Xi Jinping is preparing China for a prolonged trade standoff, emphasizing domestic resilience, alternative markets, and government stimulus to mitigate U.S. trade losses. While both sides may consider temporary tariff rollbacks, Beijing is unlikely to engage seriously unless Washington abandons its maximum pressure approach. Elon Musk's role in the Department of Government Efficiency is expected to diminish soon, raising concerns about the agency's future momentum despite its institutional structure. DOGE, created by executive order under President Trump, has made sweeping changes across federal agencies, including cutting jobs, canceling contracts, and dismantling agencies like the CFPB and USAID. While Musk has been the face of DOGE, most of the work has been carried out by over 100 staffers, and its operations are set to continue, possibly shifting focus from job cuts to deregulation. Musk's departure could complicate efforts to meet DOGE's aggressive $1 trillion budget-cutting goal, especially amid criticism over its impact and legal challenges. The White House insists Musk and DOGE are not disappearing, although no clear successor has been named, and Democrats are raising concerns over Musk's conflicts of interest and time limits on his government role. Usha Vance, wife of Vice President J.D. Vance, emerged into the spotlight during their family's official trip to India, where she embraced her Indian heritage and garnered significant local media attention. Known for her quiet influence and low-profile presence in Washington, Usha played a visible advisory role during the visit, even participating in interviews and cultural events with their children. Despite her private nature and former alignment with democratic values, Usha now supports her husband's conservative politics and is considered one of his most trusted advisors. A Yale-educated lawyer and former clerk for Justice Brett Kavanaugh, she is beginning to plan initiatives as Second Lady, likely focusing on family and education-related issues. While she has hired staff and attended political events, Usha continues to prioritize her family life, balancing public responsibilities with raising their 3 children. President Trump claimed he never planned to fire Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, despite internal White House discussions exploring legal ways to do so. Legal advisors had reviewed options to remove Powell for cause, but Trump backed off after warnings from key cabinet members about the potential for market chaos. Trump's shift followed meetings with business leaders and concerns over the economic impact of his tariffs, which he also indicated could be reduced. Most analysts agreed that firing Powell wouldn't affect interest rates due to consensus among Fed board members and strong institutional support for Fed independence. The situation highlighted concerns about political interference in the Fed and its long-standing role as an independent body in setting U.S. monetary policy. Chinese battery makers CATL and BYD have unveiled new electric vehicle technologies capable of charging a car in just 5 minutes, showcasing China's technological lead in the global EV industry. These advancements, however, are currently only supported by a limited network of super-fast charging stations in China and are not accessible to American consumers due to high tariffs on Chinese EV imports. CATL also introduced a new sodium-ion battery aimed at reducing reliance on lithium, addressing potential material shortages in the EV battery supply chain. While China rapidly expands its EV infrastructure and adoption, the U.S. remains behind in battery production capabilities and charging infrastructure. Experts note that despite the impressive technology, challenges remain regarding infrastructure, battery lifespan, and cost, potentially delaying widespread adoption. President Trump reversed his stance on firing Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell and signaled potential tariff reductions on China, which led to a strong rebound in U.S. markets. Investors believe markets may be influencing Trump's policy decisions, as part financial turmoil prompted similar backpedals. The recent triple dip in stocks, bonds, and the dollar suggested signs of capital flight, likely pressuring Trump to act to stabilize the situation. While markets may temporarily restrain Trump's riskier policies, analysts caution that his decisions remain unpredictable and not always guided by economic logic. Investors shouldn't assume markets have full control over Trump's choices, as he has shown a willingness to pursue damaging policies before reversing under pressure. Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway now holds a record $318 billion in cash, largely boosted by last year's sale of a significant portion of its Apple stock. The sale appears well-timed, as Apple has since lost $1 trillion in market value, validating Buffett's cautious approach amid rising market uncertainty. Past experiences such as overvalued holdings like Coca-Cola in the late 90s likely influenced Buffett's decision to scale back on Apple. Investors now speculate what Buffett will do with the cash, with potential targets like Coca-Cola or American Express, or waiting for crisis-era opportunities similar to those in 2008 and 2009. His cash buildup suggests a strategic pause, as Buffett waits for better deals, bolstered by treasury yields and limited appealing options given Berkshire's massive size. President Trump stated he has no intention of firing Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, despite recent public criticisms and social media posts suggesting otherwise. Trump expressed a desire for Powell to be more proactive in lowering interest rates, but clarified that not doing so wouldn't be a deal breaker. He also announced that the current 145% tariffs on Chinese imports would be reduced substantially, though not eliminated entirely. Trump's earlier threats to remove Powell had fueled market volatility and raised legal questions, as Fed chairs can only be removed for cause. Experts warned that undermining the Fed's independence could damage investor confidence and increase borrowing costs across the economy. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced a major restructuring of the State Department aimed at reducing what he described as bloated bureaucracy and aligning the agency with President Trump's America First policies. The overhaul includes cutting 700 jobs, closing 132 offices, and eliminating the undersecretary positions focused on civilian security, democracy, and human rights. Rubio criticized existing human rights offices as platforms for left-wing activism, especially targeting their stances on Israel and migration. While the reorganization preserves some human rights and refugee functions, they will now fall under a new Office for Foreign Assistance and Humanitarian Affairs. Critics and former diplomats acknowledge the need for efficiency, but warn that reducing diverse perspectives may weaken the department's diplomatic capabilities. Despite major policy changes under President Trump, like tariffs, deportations, and federal layoffs, there has been little noticeable impact on key economic indicators such as job growth, inflation, and consumer spending. Federal spending has actually increased in the first 80 days of Trump's term, and job cuts in federal workforce have been minimal compared to initial goals. Some Trump policies like tariffs and AI chip restrictions have spooked markets, but much of the economic response has been muted or delayed due to time lags, import stockpiling, and the sheer scale of the U.S. economy. Feedback effects such as falling oil prices and airline fares, along with cautious corporate behavior and limited immediate enforcement, have helped offset the impact of aggressive policies. Tough economic data currently shows stability. Experts warn that Trump's actions may have delayed or accumulating effects, especially as core challenges and political pushback continue to evolve. President Trump renewed his call for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates, criticizing Fed Chair Jerome Powell and suggesting he might try to remove him. Trump cited low inflation data from March to support his demands, despite concerns among some of his advisors about lowering rates too quickly. The markets reacted negatively, with the dollar sliding, stocks falling, and bond yields rising amid fears of increased political interference in monetary policy. Trump's comments revived tensions from his first term, but are seen as more serious now due to broader tariffs and reduced institutional resistance. Powell maintains that he cannot be legally dismissed before his term ends in 2026, and any attempt to do so could lead to a legal showdown. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is under intense scrutiny for creating a private signal chat with his wife, lawyer, and others, where he allegedly shares sensitive military information. This follows an earlier controversy in which Hegseth shared details of a planned U.S. strike in Yemen with a different signal group, including senior Trump officials. Former Pentagon spokesman John Realty accused Hegseth of fostering chaos at the Pentagon, citing mass firing and internet misinformation campaigns. Despite the controversy, the White House and some Republican lawmakers continue to support Hegseth, while others, including Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, are calling for his removal. The Pentagon Inspector General has launched an investigation into signal chats, while questions continue to swirl around Hegseth's conduct and leadership.